Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Brook. I'm part of the team with Brave Global, and thank you for joining us today. We have two very special guests that we're going to be talking with today that are very dear to our organization. And both of these amazing women, as you can see right here, have been a part of the foster care system at one point in their childhood. And now they've devoted their life's work to empowering vulnerable generations with the knowledge and the experience of what they've been through. So both Lisa and Tori, thank you so much for being with us today. And let's get started. So I wanted to ask you both if you could introduce yourselves and share a bit of your background growing up in foster care.
Sure,
So
I'll go
whoever wants
first.
to go first.
My name is Lisa Barnes, and I grew up in and out of the foster care system my whole adolescence. To the best of my recollection, from what I can remember and count specific locations, I was in between 30 and 40 different foster homes.
Wow.
And I'm sure there were more, but that's all that I can remember. And when I was growing up, for me, my story of my involvement with foster care was one of respite and hope. Every time I was in a different foster care situation, whether it was a group home or like a family situation, it was always a time where I was encouraged and supported. I never felt abused. I never felt neglected. I felt like I could finally just relax and be a kid and not have to be concerned with watching out for myself as the sole caregiver for myself, not having to worry about my mom and what she was doing and if she was mixing pills and booze again or who was coming in and out of her house. And so when I was in foster care, I felt like I could just be a kid. And in a lot of ways, I'm kind of hesitant to share that kind of perspective because I know that's not everyone's perspective. And for me, I was never, ever mistreated. I don't even remember being yelled at in foster care, which kind of says a lot because I was rough. I was a rough kid. And a lot of my foster care situations were group homes, more than like residential in a family's home situation, because I had a history of violence. And so a lot of times they would put us in a different location with different types of supervision and trained staff and stuff like that. So even in those kinds of situations, I always felt cared for and people were kind and taught me how to do things my mom never taught me how to do.
That's awesome that you had such a good experience. And I understand a bit of you saying you're hesitant to share that because I feel like kind of a lot of the dominant stories that I hear are a little bit on the flip side of that.
Absolutely. And I think it's kind of one of those things, like the sad story makes for a better story in a lot of times, like when people give birth, you very rarely remember the stories of it was great, it was smooth, everything worked really well, the epidural was on point on the first go.
I'd love to hear more of those.
Right. You hear more of like, oh, I died twice and, like all
They
these.
did the epidural wrong. Yeah.
So it was kind of like that for me. I really think there's more stories of good, positive interactions than negative, but they don't always make for the kind of story that people want to hear. But my story was a really good story. And that really spearheads the way that I interact with folks who are in the foster care world now. Is I think it's important that we champion them and treat them as heroes, because I think it would be great if we didn't need a foster care system, but we do. Right. And I think there's a lot of great things about what we have happening. And I think we should treat folks that are social workers or foster parents like heroes, because they are.
Yes. Tori, would you like to share your story?
I went into the foster care system for the first time when I was 4 years old, after my mom had been caught trafficking drugs with her boyfriend. And I would say that my experience in foster care wasn't as good. In my very first foster home, I had trouble wetting the bed, and my foster mom made me wash my underwear in the toilet until my hands were pruny. And I was eventually reunified with my mom, and I lived with her until I was 12. before, when I was 4, before I went into the foster care system for the first time, my mom seemed very stable to me. I would say that we lived a very good life. We ate steak and green beans and crab legs because we had a lot of money because she sold drugs. So things looked really good from a 4-year-old's perspective, I think. And then as I got older, the dysfunction was revealed to me. My mom is diagnosed with bipolar and schizophrenia, so her mental illness oftentimes manifested in abuse and neglect, and so she would run off or leave, and when she would come back she would be very physically abusive, and she would also abuse drugs. So I went back into the foster care system again when I was 12 years old, and I would say that experience was good and bad. It just depended on the home. So the most heart-wrenching part was I was separated from my sister after our first home, after I reported abuse that was happening in the home, and I wasn't believed, and I was labeled as unplaceable and a liar and manipulative, and that was probably the hardest thing I have ever experienced, because my heart was to protect my sister and
Yeah.
me, and my heart was to seek justice, and then I was viewed as that was not anything, that was not my intent. I got placed in a residential group home, which I think was a very good experience for me, because even though I don't think that I could relate to a lot of the young women that were in the home, for the first time I understood that I was a leader and that I had an influence on other young women and that my behaviors impacted other people. And on top of that, I had counseling for the first time.
Wow.
And so that just changed my world, because I was able to understand how to talk to people and how to cope with my feelings, and how to understand why my mom was the way she was, and why hurt people, and why heal people can heal people. And that was kind of the foundation that was built, where I could decide which kind of person I wanted to be. After that group home, I moved amongst a lot of homes for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes I was a poop head and I got kicked out because I wouldn't follow rules, or I was being rebellious. Or other times foster parents would just break really basic rules, like in some every county is different, but in my county you couldn't have any other adults living in the home that weren't like certified or had a background check. And so some just really basic rules like that, like the caseworker would find out that there was another adult and they would have to take me because the adult had a criminal record. And so I would say that there were some really hard experiences, but for me, I felt like every home had prepared me for the next, and every home made me who I am today, and it made me have the values that I have placed in my family.
Hmm. I love how you mentioned that little things that we wouldn't even think about could affect your placement, you know? I think when you think about foster care and you think, oh, a child's being moved from one home to the next, you don't think it's because of something like, I guess, as trivial as these minor rules. I mean, not saying that the rules aren't important. I agree that they are important, but that's really interesting to understand that perspective of what can affect a child's placement. I love how you said as well, like the phrase hurt people, I feel like everyone knows that phrase, but I love that healed people heal people. I think that that's harder to say because it's a tongue twister, but it's an incredible statement, and actually leads me to my next question. So Lisa, you authored our very first Brave interactive journal, and when Tori said healed people heal people, that journal is so incredible because it really focuses in on identity and empowerment. And my question for you is, why does the theme of identity mean so much to you? And what do you think about understanding identity? Why do you think that that's the first thing a you should have contact with one of our interactive journals?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I think that the concept of identity is really important, and also as equally challenging for kids who've grown up in the system or in dysfunctional family situations, or even kids that have been through their parents getting divorced or separated. Mm-hmm. It's really hard for us to know who we are and where we fit. And for several different areas across the whole spectrum, I think for me, the idea of like culture and race and nationality was always something that I wanted to know where I would fit in that, because I didn't have one. So I don't have like stories of migration stories of my ancestors, or this is the language that grandma used to speak, and this is a fun word in that language. And because I never had that, I always felt like something was missing. And so I think culturally and racially and ethnically, our identity is really important, because I think that comes to be a big part of who we are, how we see ourselves, but also how other people see us. And so I think it's important to know how to navigate that. For me, my feeling like I need to be part of a people group was so intense that's why I'm covered in tattoos and have big stretched ears, and my hair is usually weird, because that's my people. Like the postmodern, weird American millennial, elder millennial, that's my people. That's who I am. That's where I fit. Yeah. And so when I'm someplace and I see another weird tattooed girl, I'm like, oh, my people are here, you know? And so I think that part of identity is really important. But I think for a lot of us, we do what we can just to fit in. So we don't spend a lot of time thinking, what do I really like? What foods do I really like? Because either you don't have much to choose from, and so you don't get to pick what you like. It's just whatever you've been given. Or I remember sometimes in some group homes, the food was gross and I did not like it. But I was so afraid if I let them know what I liked or what I didn't, that they would kick me out. And so I didn't even give myself time to be like, well, what color bedspread would I really like? Because it didn't matter, because I never got to choose it. What food would I like to choose for my birthday celebration? It didn't matter, because I never got to choose it. So I think really taking time to ask yourself those questions, like, what do I really like? Like, for example, at the end of the first Brave Journal, there's a pretty big section on life skills. And something that was kind of revolutionary for me growing up was realizing how much I liked fried eggs. Because when you live in a group home, nobody makes fried eggs, because you can't do fried eggs for a crowd. And so we would always have scrambled eggs, and scrambled eggs are fine. But I remember the first time I had that runny yolk, I'm like, where has this been my whole life? So in that journal, I have 6 different ways to cook an egg. And I encourage the girls to try them all. And which one's your favorite? Maybe you're going to love a poached egg, or hard boiled is your jam, or, you know, just take some time to know that you're worth exploring yourself, not based on if other people will like you more because of it, or if your foster parents will think you're more of a good kid if you do it one way, or if you're just easier to deal with, people will like you more. So you don't have a lot of preferences that you set up for yourself, because you just want to slide under the radar a lot of times. But I think knowing that you are important enough to figure those things out is a big deal.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's such an awesome perspective, because identity is something that everyone, you know, wrestles with and goes through at one point or another. But I think it's so valuable for everyone to realize that we are worth getting to know, and we are worth finding out, what do we love? What makes us tick? What do we enjoy more than other things? And I remember the first time I saw the life skills at the end of your journal, I was like, this is incredible. I was like, where was this when I was a teenager?
Right. Even the part on how to do laundry, you know, like I have a infograph in there over what all of the symbols mean, because I didn't know that till I was grown. I was messing up laundry my whole life.
Oh, seriously. Thank God for Google. I'm like, what does this do? I don't know. What's this setting? And they're all automated now, so it's very confusing. You push the wrong thing and your thing will explode. Who knows? Who knows anymore? But, you know, Lisa, you said something earlier that I wanted to circle back with Tori. in regards to being an advocate for the foster care system and the fact that a lot of the press and a lot of the media around it are all the troubling statistics, and there's, you know, it can be a lot of doom and gloom. But Tori, you, especially on your social media, I love following you. You are a beautiful writer, and I love hearing your story and the way you articulate yourself. But lately you have been opening up and sharing your story and advocating for the foster care system and speaking out in favor of people embracing it instead of the constant, I guess, the negative newsreel about it. Can you tell us why you believe it's important to support our local governing systems and what happens when we don't?
Yeah, so first off, I think the foster care community, being a part of it, is really special. I used to be really bitter because like no one knows what questions to ask us, because when you ask us like how many siblings do we have, we say 50 and then we name all of them and it's super awkward. But when you're actually in the community, they do know what questions to ask, and it's totally normal to say I have 50 siblings and here are all their names and ages, and it's super weird, and that's totally fine. And I think for me, just recognizing that like this is so special, being a part of something so unique and being able to relate to people who have been through really hard things, really unique things. Our experiences are just, they are rich, and they do bring a lot of, I think, unique life lessons at a very young age. They just have so much value, and the community has so much value. So I first want to shine light onto that. And secondly, I had a conversation. So we have a really strong homeschool population in this small rural town that I live in. And I went to public school all the way through. My husband was homeschooled all the way through. And I was talking to this woman who was a very gifted teacher. She had homeschooled her own kids. She's a gifted teacher. But she was talking about the public school system, like it's broken. I would never go into that. And I was like, but you're the teacher that they need. Like,
Oh, wow.
even because you see the brokenness. And years before, I remember saying, I will never step into the foster care system in any way because it's broken and it's messed up. And when I told her that, God just really convicted me and was like, well, you've said that about something too. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's shining a light in dark places.
It's incredible. It actually makes me think of all the things that I said I would never do. And as soon as I say them out loud, I'm like, oh no. Now God's like, oh, really?
I seriously think everything that I say I'm not going to do, God has put it in my life and somehow made me do it. I'm going to stop saying I'm never going to do things.
Yeah, I'm trying like carefully frame my terminology when I strongly think against something, you know, I'm like, so Lisa, you have a daughter who is, how old is your daughter?
Hurricane is 8.
Her name is Hurricane?
Well, not legally. It's not her government name.
I love that so much.
Yeah. Her government name is Layla, which is beautiful. But we've called her Hurricane since she was, I don't know, 6 months old. So
8 years old is a very fun name. And I love the nickname Hurricane. She's going to be a mighty woman. She probably already is. I haven't met her yet.
Yeah, I say that she's Hurricane because wherever she's been, you know she's been there. So maybe that's because physically there is remnants, or because she definitely leaves her mark in people's hearts, and she's you got to earn it. You got to earn your way into her letting you in. She's a little guarded, and she doesn't just love everyone right away. But once she does, forever. She will love you forever. So.
Those are my favorite people as well, because you know when you get a response from them or you get some love from them that it's legit, you know.
For sure.
If you could speak to your 8-year-old self, what would you say to yourself about possibilities and overcoming circumstances that are beyond your control?
Yeah, I think realizing that no matter how we've grown up or what our situations have been like, most of it's beyond our control. You know, how our parents respond to us, the way that they discipline us, what our living situation has been like, a lot of that is beyond our control. So often we assume that because ours is bad, we were the only one who experienced that kind of bad. But really, we just know ours. So it's not about quantifying our experience as how bad was it really, or comparing it to someone else's experience. But I think it's realizing that we all have our stuff and a lot of it wasn't our fault. On the flip side of that, there are a lot of things that, regardless of what our home situation looks like, we can control. One of the things I tell Hurricane often is, you are the boss of your feelings. You can feel however you need to feel. I don't ever say, stop crying. I don't ever say, that is dumb. Don't think that way. Don't feel that way. You're wrong in your feelings because of this. I say, you're the boss of your feelings.
That's so
no one,
good.
Yeah, and just telling her no one can make you feel anything because no one else is in charge of your feelings but you. They can, someone is mean to you and you feel a certain way, and then you realize, I'm the boss of my feelings and I'm going to move on. Or you can say, I'm just going to let that wreck my day. I think a lot of times I'm learning more, especially as we're in this season of quarantine, and as I'm both of my kids, my 15-year-old son and my 8-year-old girl, I'm their primary source of everything, of education, of love, of companionship, of humor, of food, of everything. I'm learning more that a lot of the things that I thought really mattered don't. And even the things like, my kids need an education. They have to learn these things. They have to understand these concepts. They have to know how to do these math formulas. And that's true, they do. But things that are most important are, how do you regulate your emotions? How do you know to calm yourself down when you are freaking out or really, really sad? How do you do those things? How do you interact with other people? How do you realize that just because this situation blows, my whole life doesn't have to blow, right? That we can be more than our situation, and you're the boss of your brain and you're the boss of your emotions, and ain't nobody gonna push you around, right? Because you're nobody's doormat. And so realizing that, and realizing that no one has control over those things, even if we've been dealt a raw deal, some of us, if you've been born to an addict parent, you've been dealt a raw deal. And I get that. And life is gonna look different than for other people. That doesn't mean that it's over. And it doesn't mean you can't do anything. I myself, it took me 5 years to finish high school, and I'm incredibly dyslexic. And I've written 2 books, and I have a college education. So just because it was hard for a little bit doesn't mean you got to stay hard or you stay stuck or you can't accomplish those things. So I think realizing there's some things you can't control, but there's a lot that you can, and doing the best you can with what you can control.
Preach. I'm so happy to have this conversation with both of you. It's so amazing to hear. Both of you could just talk for like an hour and just let it flow, let it all come out of you, everything that you've been through, but not just what you've been through, what you've chosen to do with it, and how you've chosen to take your experiences and the good and the bad and the ugly and use it to pass on to the next generation. And Lisa, what you're telling your daughter, it would have made a life difference for me to understand, to understand my feelings, just understanding that we're actually in charge of that kind of stuff, that we are the bosses and we are the owner and operators of ourselves. I just think that's so incredible.
Me too.
Tori, you have recently, I saw on your Instagram, and I've heard you share a bit, that you have recently started being a foster parent as well. And you have your own child and you're pregnant, is that right?
Yep, all right.
Correct. My question is, what has it been like for you, basically understanding the dynamic of foster care as a parent? What has it opened your eyes to that maybe you hadn't seen before?
I think when I was younger, and this actually goes with just what Lisa said, like, I'm the boss of my feelings. When I was younger, and even sometimes now, I think if someone just would have said this, or someone would have just given me this kind of love instead of this kind of love, then I would have been able to love them and I would have been better off. And I see like the love that I'm pouring out right now, like all the kinds of love, I'm like pouring them out and they're not being received. And I think I look back and I see that I did that. I also think that I have to keep in mind that there's no God trying to show me how bad I was. He's trying to show me how good I can be. He's growing me in forgiveness and in grace and in love and mercy. But sometimes I can look at my foster son and I do feel heartbroken. I think, oh, this is the hurt that I've caused people. Like in my senior year of college, I eventually was adopted as an adult. And I went to my dad's house when I didn't have track meets on the weekends or like holidays in college. So like I never really lived with him for a long time, but I would go back to his house and that's who I considered my home and my family. That's who I still consider my family today. So my senior year of college, like I was a senior in college, an educated woman who had worked through all of this stuff in counseling. And we got in this argument and I told him I was leaving. But deep in my heart, I was like, he kicked me out. He doesn't want me here. He hates me. He doesn't love me. I was a senior in college. And that's something that our foster son does often. He's like, you're kicking me out. You don't love me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is what I did to my dad. Like he's my hero. He is the person who spoke so much life and love into me and really was the foundation of my confidence before God was there. And I just think like, wow, this is the hurt that I've inflicted on him. And I know that sounds so sad, but that's the best thing about pain is that when we feel it, it makes us really not want to make others feel it.
Wow. That's incredible to think on just the perspective of understanding, because you had so much going on inside yourself. It's hard to see how much people were trying to be there for you in some circumstances and what they were pouring out and what they were giving. And I think that it's incredible that you are in a place now where you not only see that, but that you have the ability to do that for him, you know? And I don't know anything about him. I don't know his story, but I'm really happy that he landed in a home like yours, because you not only have your own experience, but you have like this wealth of love and, you know, the love of God flowing through you for him. And, you know, I just want to encourage you, I guess, just as a friend, just being no loving word, no loving action will ever go to waste. All of those things, they'll accomplish what God wants them to accomplish in him, even if you can't see it. So
yes, and that's something I'm holding on to too. Like I might not be enough in all this, but God is enough. Like he is working in the unseen and he is doing things that I couldn't even imagine in this boy's heart.
yeah.
Because when I look back on my foster care experience, God was doing things in my heart, but no one might have seen the fruit of that for years.
Yeah. And I would encourage you, Tori, too, that as much as like, it's really awesome that he's with you and that you two speak the same language, right? The same emotional language that a lot of other people don't. I would just encourage you too, that most of our conflicts are really not about the other person, right? For all of us, from children to adults to into our oldness, oldie McOldersons. The conflicts that we have are really because what we need most, and it's different for everybody, our most fundamental needs are not being met. And so a lot of times, or we're afraid that they won't be met. It's like maybe not even based in reality, right? For example, my most important need I have is acceptance. More than anything else in the planet, more than I need food, more than I need to be respected, more than I need anything, I need to feel accepted. And so sometimes I'll get into a conflict with someone and it'll have nothing to do with acceptance, but I'll feel like, uh-oh, see, you don't fit, Lisa. If you really fit, they wouldn't have said that to you. You wouldn't have done this. And then I kind of spiral in my mind, like I make a narrative that's not real to make sure that my truth is consistent, even if it's incorrect.
Wow.
So I think we kind of do that from, cradle to the grave until we realize like that's what it is. And it sounds like his most basic need, just like yours when you were growing up, was that no one's going to throw me away. Don't throw me away. And so instead of saying, no, you're not, that's not what I'm saying at all. Just saying, oh, I just love you. I just love you, right? And you're here, and I'm so glad you're here. Even though maybe in a minute you're not. Maybe you're like, you drive me crazy. But just knowing that a lot of our conflicts, it's not about the person we're having a conflict with. It's just our own stuff.
Yeah, the unmet need. The idea of the unmet need is so crucial.
So crucial. I read something by this couple called the Van Yperens, and it was all about church conflict and resolving that. And it really changed my whole life. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, if that's a book you haven't written yet, you should, because I would read it. But yeah, that's so true. And I think that everything that you just shared along the lines of how the conflict comes from what's happening inside of us. And Tori, your experience right now, I think this is really good for whoever's watching this, to really have an understanding of kind of an inside look of foster care as a foster parent or as a foster youth. And because it's Foster Care Awareness Month, that I feel like you both have said so many things that are so beneficial to people who are interested. But if you had to specify something for people to do within their communities, since the foster care system is across every state, in every city, in every county. So no matter where anyone is watching this, what's something that you would advise that they would do to really either be involved or in a big way or in a small way to support either foster care youth or foster parents? What would you advise?
Tori, you go. You get this because you're in the driver's seat with that right now.
Okay. So I always say support people, because there's a lot of really high turnover in the foster care system. And as I just talked about, foster youth don't want to be thrown away. As Lisa just said, we want to be accepted. But if all of these people who are in foster youth caseloads are constantly leaving because it's such a hard job, and they're not to blame. The job is really hard and they have to take care of themselves and their families. But I often think that they leave because they're not well supported and they are given too much to take care of. So I always say, make a meal for foster parents. If you don't know, how do I get to know my foster parents? Go to your church, go to your community group and ask, are there any foster parents in town that you know that I can support? That's really awkward, but we have to step up and do the uncomfortable things if we really want to change anything. Mentor foster youth. In my story, I feel like I give all my credit to my mentors. There are foster parents who had such a big impact, but being a mentor is like being the cool grandparent. Foster youth get to go and hang out with people who aren't disciplinary people, who don't have so much control over their lives, and just get to be a friend. You just get to be a friend and a role model. And then not every county has this, but a CASA is a court-appointed special advocate, and their job is so cool because they advocate for what is in the best interest of the child. Caseworkers and county workers, they often work for the foster parents. Of course, they have a heart for the kids, but they just have a lot of quotas and things that they have to meet that can conflict the best interest of the child. Yeah. So for the child to have an advocate that is for them, and their job description is literally to do what is best for the kid, is really important. So a GAL, a CASA, a mentor, all those great. There's just so much. Google, but all of the things. There's
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah, I would super echo that stuff that Tori said. And I think a lot of times people don't approach the foster care system at all because they don't want to be a foster parent. And so they think because they don't want to be a foster parent, there's no space for them to make change. And that is such incorrect thinking. I say support the heroes, same as Tori.
Yeah.
When I'm a Brave Global coach, and so when I'm teaching people how to do Brave, I say the first thing you want to do is get a box of donuts, go to your local social worker's office, DSHS, whatever y'all call in your community, bring the box of donuts and say, hey, we just want to say thanks. We know what you do. We know it's hard. We just want to say thanks.
Wow.
And then depending on your sphere of influence and what resources you have at your disposal, like the sky's the limit. So for me in my community, I'm one of the executive directors of the Salvation Army. And so I have a lot of things that I can help connect people with. School supplies, immediate food services, things like that are really tangible needs. And so you just let people know, what can you bring to the table? And let people, don't go in thinking you know how to fix it, because you probably don't.
Right.
And there's different elements that could be tweaked and refined in every community. So if you've heard one horror story of a busted system in one place, that doesn't mean that's the same scenario in your place and where you live. So go in ready to be a learner, ready to be a helper and supporter, and not the one who's wagging your finger or telling them what they're doing wrong. I know Christian ladies love doing that. So refined, reel that in. And just go in ready to be a support. Find out what maybe meetings they have that community people are allowed to come and sit at the table. One of the things, and you'll learn about different opportunities for service in your community, but like Tori said, they're all different. CASA is phenomenal. We have something here in our area called Office Moms and Dads, which is where you go through this training. And what happens when a child is removed from their home, usually, because staff is so low, that child sits at the foot of their social worker, maybe coloring, maybe playing with Legos while their social worker's on the phone trying to find placement for them.
Wow.
So a lot of time that child who's on the listening to the social worker on the phone is kind of being re-traumatized.
Yeah.
Because they're having to hear over and over, this is what the parent did, this is what mom's boyfriend did, this is how long mom has been gone, mom says she doesn't want to try anymore, this is a history, this kid is a bedwetter, this kid fights, this kid does whatever. And it's really damaging. So if you're part of Office Moms and Dads, they send out a text blast and we say, we just need somebody to come play Legos for 2 hours. And you sit, and you don't have to take them home. You don't have to provide any supplies. You just go and you sit and you color or play Legos or do whatever that kid needs, just so he has a little bit of space. That's one thing that is not in every community, but when you start going to the meetings and engaging with social workers, you'll know what like thing is in your community that you can just jump in and be a part of. But just know that if you don't want to be a foster parent, you don't have to. Not everyone can or should be foster parents. Please don't think everyone should be a foster parent, because not everybody should. But just because you can't or won't or don't wanna, doesn't mean you get an out. Because especially if you are a follower of Jesus, we are mandated. We are mandated by Jesus to care for the widow and the orphan. Mm-hmm. And in our world today, the widow and the orphan are single mothers and kids in foster care. Mm. So we are mandated by the cross. If you say you love Jesus, then get off your butt. You don't get a pass. You don't have to have them live in your house, and that's fine, but you got to do something. Mm-hmm. You have to do something. And there's different degrees of help and support. And I've talked a lot about like a tiered system, you know, kind of from dipping your toe in the water to fully jumping in cannonball. There's lots of different ways, but just start with a box of donuts and saying thank you.
That's awesome. Yes, round of applause, both of you. It's just been so incredible for me. You know, I've worked, I live in Orange County, and I've worked with foster care and probation system here, just with different nonprofits, just supporting. And even though I've done that for about 6 or 7 years, I learned a lot through this conversation today. And I think it's incredible for anyone watching this today to know that there are roles that they can fill if the idea of being a foster parent is really intimidating, or, you know, they're just not sure. There are ways to be a support. There are ways to be supports to families, to the children. And I know in my community, different nonprofits do respite work where they'll provide babysitting or clean some of the houses for foster parents. And just those little things that take a couple hours can make a huge difference in the stress levels of, you know, everyone knows, like, it's no mystery that running a home and taking care of kids is a lot of work anyways. So being able to do that for someone who's maybe caring for a vulnerable youth that has a bit more going on, is awesome to know that we can do that. So thank you guys so much for sharing your story and speaking out of your experience and out of your wisdom. And I feel like I just got preached to, so I really enjoyed it. But thank you guys so much for representing what it looks like to be brave so well, because it's not one thing that it looks like to be brave. It can look like so many different things. And it's when you're living out of your experiences and using the wisdom and the things that you've learned, the good and the bad, to reach out to others, to encourage others. And for those of you that are watching, if you want to know more of how to get involved, braveglobal.org is our website, and we do have resources online for you to check out. Actually, I think some of Lisa's journal is on our resources page, so you could check out pieces of that. And remember that we see you, that you matter, and you belong. And we love you. Thank you guys for watching. Tori and Lisa, thank you guys so much for sharing.